Welcome to the Core A podcast. This is Gerald. Our guest this time is Hyunho Jung, also known as Rangchu. Rangchu is a two-time Tekken World Tour champion, once in 2018 in Tekken 7 and once in 2024 in Tekken 8. We go over topics like how he got into competitive gaming, his life in Japan, Pakistani Tekken players, his thoughts on modern fighting games, his personal life, and more. This podcast was recorded in Korean originally and is subtitled in English, but we are trying something new, and so we're also adding an English version. So there will be an English dub where I dub myself in English and Kevin dubs over Rangchu in English. So that will be the audio version. Please let us know what your thoughts are on that. Any feedback is welcome. So without further ado, I present to you the Core Podcast Rangchu edition. Enjoy. Okay, 안녕하세요, 랑추님. Hello and welcome, Rangchu. You're back on Core Gaming again. How do you feel now after winning TWT again this time?
이제 6년 전에 우승하고 나서
After winning the title 6 years ago, I personally thought this opportunity would never come again. I was very glad and honored to be able to win the first Tekken 8 TWT championship.
The situation is completely different this time. Last time the prize money was pretty small, but now since the prize money went up, this must have a big impact on your career. How do you feel about this? Does it feel like a huge achievement since last time you've won? 복수됐다 막 그런 느낌이 있었나요?
그쵸 이제 예전에는 7,500
Right.
달러.
The prize money last time was about $7,500. I didn't know anything at the time, so I didn't have any regrets.
시간이 지나서 보니까 이제
As time went by, I realized that the prize money was small in comparison.
그다음에 이제 올해도 이제
There were
대회는
few
되게
big
많이
tournaments this year,
에버라든지
but I didn't do too great.
좋은 성적을 못 내가지고
To name the biggest two, it was EVO and EWC.
를 준비해가지고 열심히
So I prepared for TWT finals and worked hard for it.
상금도 그때는 7,500달러.
I'm glad it went well. The prize money boosted from 7,500 to 100,000 now, so it's very good now. Another big difference is that I'm finally a family man now, so it's extra happiness on top.
배로 기쁜 것 같습니다.
예. 이제 이번에 이제 가족이 이제 So recently you've welcomed a child to your family.
네.
Now that you're focusing mainly on Tekken, 이제 완전 게임할 You're going to have a little bit of extra pressure, I imagine, needing to raise a family and such. How much of this would influence your future career, you think? 게임할 때도 그렇게 큰 영향이 있나요?
네, 이제 아기 생기기 전에는
Yeah. Before I had the baby, I could only focus on Tekken.
지금처럼 막
Now that I have a family to feed, with Tekken, I feel a sense of responsibility.
먹여 살려야 되니까 이제 책임감
So I need to practice more sincerely than ever.
확실하게 연습을 해야겠다는 생각이 더 많이 들고 합니다.
예. Since you're using Kuma as your main and you're known for using Kuma to win tournaments, how do you feel that your opponents are understanding how to fight against Kuma more and learning against him?
그쵸 이제
Yeah, well, I was the only one who used Kuma in the competitive scene.
쓰는 유저가 없었어가지고 이제
It was naturally hard for other players to prepare for the Kuma matchup.
좀 많이 어려웠어요.
Now, after winning the championship, most players seem to understand how to fight against the matchup.
쿠마를 어떻게 상대해야 될지 이제 다들 아는 분위기니까.
Season 2 will come out very soon, and we'll have to see how Kuma changes with it.
쿠마가 어떻게 바뀌는지 한번 보고
네.
그다음에 신 캐릭터 같은 것도
I'll stand by the fence and see how the changes come out. Depending on how much Kuma will change, I'll seek to use 2 or 3 characters as backup.
그러니까 얼마나 바뀔지 모르겠는데 일단 그쵸 이제
So it's also important to catch how other characters will change, so I can prepare for the worst. I'll try my best next year.
또 잘 해봐야죠.
네, 저번에 인터뷰 했었을 때 When we did the interview last time, you said that the individual character matchup is more important than the tier list. Do you still think that way?
네, 상성이 더 중요하다고 생각을
Yes, I still think the matchup is more important than tier lists.
엄청 아래 티어라고 생각을 하는 분들이
Kuma is really down at the bottom of the known tier list right now, but I think he is better than what most people think. Because Kuma's move list is subpar, but his damage output is no joke.
Yeah, huge damage, right?
데미지로 커버가 되니까 이 게임이
Yeah, the damage output makes up for it.
예.
철권 8 초반에는
When Tekken 8 just came out,
이걸로 어떻게
I was a little confused to decide on strategy,
했었는데 생각을 많이 하기도 했고 이제 주변 사람들이 이제
and some players even recommended me to get rid of him and play someone else.
캐릭을 해보는 게 더 좋을 수도 있을 것 같다라고
아, 그런 얘기 들었었어요. They really said that?
저한테 많이 했었는데
Yeah, some actually did,
근데 막상 또 해보니까 게임이
but I pushed with Kuma and it worked out well.
예.
뭐 올해는 일단 쿠마로 일단 해보자.
So I decided to roll with Kuma for the
Yeah.
first tier, and he's working out so far.
그럼 그런 친구들한테 So I guess you can now tell them that you were right all along.
그거까지는 아니고 이제
It was really hard to say.
이제 빨리 떨어지고
I got eliminated early in brackets back at EVO and EWC.
예.
So even I was contemplating my character choice. I actually did practice other characters during that time, but ultimately they weren't backing up my favorite playstyle. Since I was running out of time until the TWT finals, I had to force myself to mainly upskill on Kuma.
예. 당연히 이번 TWT에서는 그 파키스탄 선수들이 Of course, there are a few Pakistani players at this TWT, which reminds me, thanks so much for translating the documentary. 번역을 해주셔서.
Oh, you mean the miracle of Pakistani Tekken?
Yeah, you translated it into Japanese with Mimi, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, we worked together on it.
Many thanks for that. Harada-san even noticed it, so it was a great help.
Oh, if you check your YouTube channel analytics, were there quite a few viewers from Japan?
그거는 잘 모르겠어요. I don't know the numbers, but I think a lot of Japanese people watched it.
네네.
They retweeted it a lot on Twitter, I remember. Yeah, I think it'd be cool to have more Japanese viewership for the Korea gaming channel. I hope one day I can translate all my videos, but there are way too many, and I think it would take a long time. 많아가지고 시간이 좀 오래 걸릴 것 같아요. 네, 그 이제 when I was at the TWT finals venue, which was in Japan, I imagined that the Japanese players would be supporting their players. But this time, I think you actually got a lot of support from the Japanese players. It was unfortunate that all the Japanese players got eliminated before top 8. But I guess in your case, you're a Korean who lived in Japan for so long, marrying a Japanese person and having a child and family to support. So I guess, do you feel that you're now getting the same support from both Japan and Korea at this point?
근데 반반 이렇게
I think it's half and half.
그때 현장에서는 이제
At that time, I thought Japanese players
일본 선수들이 연습을 할
would advance a lot because they were so good during practice. Unfortunately, they were all eliminated early, so the remaining players at the end didn't have any Japanese players left. So I think there was a lot of support for me because I'm technically still active in the Japanese Tekken scene.
Yeah.
The Pakistani players who have won several tournaments recently. So I think the people, the spectators, also wanted to see someone else from other regions win for a change. Also, there's that fact that I play Kuma, who you don't usually see. These factors all added up, so I got a lot of support.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, it was a big boost of encouragement.
Yeah, these days it's probably hard to get cheers from being a Dragunov main.
Right, it's because the spectators prefer seeing a variety of characters on the screen.
Yeah, definitely, that's true. I saw on Twitter before the TWT final, and there was a video of you and your friends practicing at some kind of venue. The message was about working hard to win. And I think Arslan replied saying, practice well, or something like that, as if he was saying, good luck, you'll need it. But in the end, working hard proved to be the right method, I guess, for you. And would you say that it was that was some kind of training camp, or did you guys just want to show off that you guys were being serious?
이제 EWC 때
So Nobi,
선수가 이제
who is a leader figure in the Japanese Tekken scene,
리더 역할을 하고 있는데 이제 EWC 때
wanted to plan a Korea and Japan Tekken training camp.
파이널 하기 전에 다 같이 한국으로 가서
Our performance at EWC was a bit disappointing.
합쳐가지고 연습을 하자라고 이제 계획을
So
세워가지고
before the TWT finals, we practiced together.
합동 연습을 하게 되었는데 이제 합동
The recent
연습을
TWT major event winners
이제
were Atif and
최근에
Arslan.
TWT 우승이 아티프랑 아슬란이었어요.
So we all had a strong will to create a winner from either Japan or Korea.
라고 강한 의지가 있어가지고 가지고 제가 그런 트윗을 한번
I made a tweet to show our resolve. The message was about we're working really hard to have a Korean or a Japanese champion this year.
이제 한국이나 일본에서 우승자를
So the presence of an active Pakistani scene actually influenced you guys big time in making this much of a commitment. I guess this is something new. This was never a thing in the past.
Yeah,
right?
in the past, players had to win an international tournament to boost up their local Tekken community. It's a proven method to improve your scene. It's the beginning stages of Tekken 8, which was very meaningful, so I think it was important to let everybody know that we're doing our best. The Pakistani players have won a lot of tournaments recently,
Yeah,
so
we
it felt
tried
like it's our turn.
our turn.
Yeah, I believe to be our turn, and that's what made me make that tweet.
그런 트윗을 하게 됐고요. 막 딱히 막 도발을 하려고
It was never meant to be a taunt.
I guess it's a friendly rivalry.
사람들도 재밌어.
Yeah, and people also like that sort of showmanship.
Yeah, it serves as a motivation to improve, right?
Yeah, so I think I did the right thing to tweet it out.
그러면 이제 so you've played against a lot of Pakistani
네.
players. You're kind of in a special situation where you're a Korean player who naturally plays with many other Korean players. But since you live in Japan, you also play with a lot of Japanese players. And being a professional player, you would have played with a lot of Pakistani players overseas. So, have you picked up on what the play styles of each of the regions are? Pakistan, Japan, Korea, how do you think they differ, or maybe they have some things in common?
이제
The big difference between Korean and Pakistani players is that the Pakistani players are more confident in their game plan
자신감 있게 플레이를 하는 게 특징이고요.
and not being intimidated by their opponents.
안정적이게 플레이를 하면서
There are a lot of Korean players who are really good at scrambles
상황에 따른 빠른 대처 능력이
and then converting situations to their advantage.
많고
네.
일본 선수들은 이제 대회가 다가와
When a new tournament is about to happen,
이 선수에 대한 분석을
Japanese players have the ability to analyze certain players really well.
인비테이셔널이나 뭐 파이널 같은 대회에서
The reason why Japanese players get good in results,
이제 어떤
especially in invitationals or like grand final events,
준비를 엄청나게 철저하게 하고
is because their analysis on their opponent is outstanding.
네.
그런 차이가 있는 것 같아요.
The downside of that
대신에 이제 단점으로는 처음
is when they play against a decent new player.
한국 선수들이 더 많이
The Koreans have an overall better outcome, but if they're fully downloaded before a planned match, the Japanese players always seem to trump them. Those are the main differences.
What would you say about the Pakistani players then?
파키스탄 선수
In terms of skill, they're as decent as the top Korean and Japanese players,
평소에 게임을 이제
but the biggest difference in their practice environment is that they play offline and on their PlayStations,
선수들은 항상 플레이스테이션
while the Korean and the Japanese players mostly rely on playing online.
때 더 이제
Their offline setup is very close to the tournament setups at events, which gives them that extra edge.
자신감이 있어가지고 자기 플레이
It might also be why they're very confident and aggressive in their game plan.
몰아붙이는 철권을 정말 잘하는
Yeah, when Atif was playing Nina against who was that player?
It was Shadow.
Yeah, Shadow. Atif did like this taunt wave dash thing at the beginning of a round, and I guess he really showed his feelings publicly.
Yeah, well, he's a great player.
Yeah, he's definitely great. It actually was kind of intimidating to see that.
철권 8이잖아요.
So
이번에.
we're at Tekken 8, and there have been a lot of mixed opinions about this game. It's still Tekken, but everyone's opinions are different as there's a new approach with a new game. Do you think this new heat system is a fresh take on the game, or has it gone too far from its roots?
이제 철권 7을 거의 이제
So we played Tekken 7 for almost 10 years. 8 or 9 years maybe?
9년 정도 했어가지고 너무 철권 7에
So many of the players' perspectives are still locked in the Tekken 7 era.
팔 처음에 나왔을 때 이제 적응을 하기가 많이 어려웠어요.
It was surely difficult to adapt to the new things at first,
경기에서 무조건 이겨야
especially for the pro players because it's their job to win.
안정적으로 이기는 게 너무 어려워가지고
Sadly, it's difficult to rely on defense in Tekken 8 in comparison to Tekken 7.
정말 많았다고 생각을 하는데 또 마치
A lot of players were complaining and frustrated, but as our experience in entering tournaments grew, the good players were still consistent at getting top placings.
잘하는 사람들이 많이 이기고 그러니까
Now the game has been figured out enough that solid gameplay is still somewhat possible,
것도 어느 정도
but much more dangerous than it was in 7.
무섭죠 이제
네.
프로 선수들 입장에서는 철권
So naturally, there are more ways to lose in Tekken 8 now.
질 확률이 좀 더 높으니까
네. 그 이지선단 상황
The guessing game has become more frequent, would you say?
근데 이제 다르게 생각해
Yeah, so think of Street Fighter 5 or 6, the game that's more chaotic than
네.
Tekken.
스트리트 파이터는 완전
Yeah, Street Fighter has been traditionally a different game in each iteration since 2 until 6.
Yeah, you see, but up to Street Fighter 4, the better players would always beat the opponents by playing safe. But then, when Street Fighter 5 was introduced, people were saying it kind of ruined the safe playstyle by adding more rock, scissors, paper elements in the game, making the pro players frustrated
예,
even
그
more.
게임이 많이 이제
Yeah, the game was completely different. 6, however, seems to be leaning more towards the classic gameplay style, but still with a mix of 5 stuff. Still a very new game, but maybe a better take than 5.
만든 것 같아가지고 6는 반응이 좀 괜찮은 것 같아요.
스트리트 파이터가 이제 더
Yeah, so Street Fighter is definitely more of a risky game, but their tournament winners are mostly the same people who used to win in older games. So I think Tekken 8 would take a similar path.
되지 않을까라고
I kind of forced myself to
네, 네.
continue on. It seemed to work out for me.
생각하더라고요.
네. 아무리 그래도 이제 게임이
Yeah, it's natural for players to adapt to new things when the game mechanics change. Those who will eventually drop out and stop playing are usually the ones that fail to adapt, right?
그 재미도 철권
Tekken 8 is definitely delivering the enjoyment aspect in the right method.
처음에는 이제
At first, the concept of taking chip damage
적응을 못했었는데
was very difficult to digest.
또 세븐 때는
But if you think of the current gameplay to be similar to Tekken 7, it wouldn't feel like a new game at all.
네, 네.
It still has that new car smell, which is why I like Tekken 8 very much at this stage.
그러면 이제 제가 이제 코리아 게이밍에 자주 나오는 화제는 이제
One of the popular topics in Korea gaming videos is the
심리
mentality and the psychology of competition. Professional players would have an edge at these things, obviously,
완전 다르게 생각할 수밖에
because it's their job to be good at these things.
다이고 책에
I was reading the book by Daigo Umehara, The Will to Keep Winning, and he mentions that
있다는 걸 보니까
the people who are potential champions have similar mindsets.
잘하고 있는데
One example is that a player should not think about the outcome before the match ends, so that they don't get distracted and like they worry about losing.
게임을 하는데 내가 지면 어떡하지?
그렇죠. 이제
이렇게-
게임을 할 때
Yeah, I do sometimes get distracted by random thoughts during mid-match, and those matches I always lose.
무조건 그래.
Did your mind ever go blank?
멍 때린 것까지는 아닌데
It's not that I went blank. It's more to do with how I should play next if I win this match. What kind of things I should prepare, and if I lose, who's my opponent? it must be so difficult to get out of loser's bracket and so forth.
네, 이제
The matches I usually win are those where I don't even think about these things and just keep focusing on the current
그것
match.
때문에
So if you were to be losing because of these distracting thoughts, is there anything you can do to minimize that?
근데 이제 그거를
Yeah, well,
생각을 안
it's
해야
not
된다고
something that you
생각해서
cannot
할 수
think
있는 게
about.
아니기 때문에 그날의
That's the hard part
컨디션에
about
따라서
it.
또 이제 그것도 결정되는 거라서
It all depends on your condition that
나는
day.
것도 그날의 컨디션이거든요.
아, 그러면
Then what's your secret to keeping your mind in a good condition? Like, for example, sleeping well?
근데 결론적으로는
Yeah, of
결국에는
course,
잠을
sleeping well, I believe, is the
게
best
가장
for keeping your concentration levels.
집중하기에는.
그러면 이제
Yeah, so mental fortitude is very necessary
게임 같은 경우에는
in competition, especially in fighting games. The matches are extremely fast paced.
엄청 중요하잖아. 특히
A lot can happen in even a blink of an eye.
한순간 뭐
You can't afford to lose in finals because of a small distraction.
그래서 근데 이제
So then, could you maybe have thought that you could cause the opponent to get distracted using a certain strategy?
근데 그런 생각은 아직
I don't think I went that far.
근데 이제
게임 안에서 이제
But the game does allow you to do things like taunt the opponent.
그런 거 이제 일부러
Some players do them deliberately. Do you feel distracted if the opponent taunts you?
만약에 이 선수가 도발했어 이제 랑치 선수한테 파이널즈인데
게임 내적으로 아니면
Oh, like in game or outside of the game?
In game, like a key charge, for example. I mean, if there was ever a time something outside affected you,
이제
yeah, let us know.
태권 사람들은 이제 스포츠맨십이라고 생각을
Many
해가지고
Tekken players deem sportsmanship a top priority, so I doubt many players would abuse the key charge in the means to distract the opponent. I'm no different, so I didn't think much about it at all.
네 랑추님은 완전
Yeah, you seem like a pretty respectful player.
선수인 것 같아서.
아,
I'm not sure about that either. I just don't think of it much.
근데 이제
But if you're on the receiving end, what would you do?
반응이 어때요?
아 그냥
I just ignore them.
Ignore? Okay.
그럴 것 같아요.
뭐 그거에
Even if I cared about it, it's not going to help me win, so I
네.
need to focus.
집중을 해야죠.
네. 그건 당연히
That is the clear answer in that situation. But there are a lot of players that would get emotional and lose focus. It's very hard to ignore such things as an intermediate player. Pro players would never get impacted by those
근데
things.
또 그렇게 도발을 해서 상대방
But there's also a good reason to not taunt your opponent. It's because if you lose, even after your taunt, you would be the one hit with a massive emotional damage.
네, 그렇죠.
That's a huge deal.
So they're afraid to act like a hero.
네.
Just like in American pro wrestling, taunting to please the crowd must be in everyone's imaginations.
네.
But the loss you take after that moment is too much of a burden.
It could also mean that they're not as confident, right? The fact that you're taking a possibility of your loss into
그거를
account.
굉장히
Yeah, the Tekken community exceptionally dislikes that idea, especially the Asian region players.
Yeah, I can see that among the Asian players.
Yeah, they don't like to get into trouble caused by their own actions. It's a fear
저는
factor
스트리트
almost.
파이터도 많이 보니까 약간
So I watch a lot of Street Fighter, and currently the player Punk is the EVO champion. Did you see any of his matches during his Street Fighter 5 days?
Not really.
He taunted a lot.
Oh, really?
Yeah, a bit much, both in and outside the games. During that era, it was pretty hype, to be honest. Now it's kind of become a more respectful game. At the time, Punk was winning tournaments consistently, and it was kind of an American Street Fighter community thing to do. So there is a cultural distinction there.
Yeah, cultural differences apply here. Korean players aren't really the type to trash talk.
But when they actually do it, it's pretty surprising. Do you remember that time in the StarCraft scene? I think Larva taunted a player, and it was like a huge deal.
Yeah, I'll just leave the trash talking to the European and the US players. It's rare to see an Asian player doing it.
But it is pretty entertaining to watch them do that, though, right?
Yeah, it's funny, all right? The Europeans have always commented about US players.
그거는
The Europeans still haven't gotten their revenge after that 10v10 exhibition
그 복수는 못한 것 같은데 콤보 브레이커에서 이제
at Combo Breaker. The US players won it.
했었을 때 미국이 우승했잖아요.
근데 또 이제 EWC
Yes, but at EWC, there were no US players at the top placings. So the European players were like, where are all the US players have gone?
그 표현 알아요? 그 이제 격투게임
Do you know the term "you're free" in English?
Easy.
쉽게 이길 수 있다.
Easy.
If you're free in the FGC, it means you're an easy opponent. The saying goes with the US FGC is because America is known as the land of the free. So if you want to make fun of your American opponent, you can quote them as being from the land of the free. It's like saying I can beat you without any effort.
보면 재밌긴 한데.
Yeah, I've seen people say that. It's very funny.
Okay.
이제 조건화 시키는 거.
So I want to move on to the topic of conditioning.
게임 내에서
It's kind of like breaking your opponent's mental fortitude without requiring trash talk. Conditioning is a skill that you have to acquire, right?
상대한테 이제 게임하면서
You can force or expose your opponent's bad habits while playing.
이제 봤었을 때 이제 아티피랑
When you're playing against Atif, you adapted to his styles pretty quickly and came back.
엄청 빨리
How were you able to achieve that in such a short span of time?
보니까 그 컨디셔닝에 대한 거 어떻게 생각해요?
아 제가 할 때.
Oh, you mean when I apply conditioning towards top players or just in
To the
general?
top players or any player where you're just kind of gauging their skill level.
Well, in general, if I see someone struggling against a certain move I do, I tend to abuse it until I win. But against top players, they would catch on pretty quick, so my abusive moves become useless. So I have to find a new plan. So with Atif, he doesn't play safe and has an aggressive tendency. Even when he's in a life deficit and is one mix-up away from losing, he will continue to pressure me like it's not threatening him at all. So I had to analyze his intentions real fast and use it to my own advantage. Against players like Arslan, Kuma has a move that uppercuts twice, which is very unsafe on block and I can get launched. I have to give up on using that move. I choose not to gamble at all because his defense is world class. I knew I cannot risk any, so I had to condition myself in this case.
Against defensive players, you chose to force yourself to play safe.
Yeah, if I deem a certain move proven useless, I'll have to abandon that move completely.
Do you think of this before the match or do you realize it much later?
I usually plan it beforehand, and I make adjustments during mid-match if necessary.
이제
Pro players play vast amounts of matches in their career, and losing is also a part of their journey. They've probably lost so many times. Since you're also human, I imagine you'd be salty when you lose as well.
영어로 그 표현이 있잖아요.
Salty? 느낌이 salty. 짠 느낌.
씁쓸한 느낌.
Oh, you mean like feeling bitter?
씁쓸한 느낌. 그 씁쓸한 느낌을
Yeah, similar. How would you cope with that, and how do you recover from that usually?
Yeah, for example, like when you travel all the way from Korea to the US and like getting eliminated very early unexpectedly.
Right. Like either you lose early or lose to a random player, just mashing with weird tactics. I don't know, have you heard of SBO? It was like Japan's Evo back in the day, and it was this single elimination with no losers bracket.
투구 같은 거 옛날에.
Oh, that must be Togeki, right?
Yeah. US players traveled all the way to Japan just to play one match and lose. I think about that.
진짜 억울하잖아요. 그래서
I imagine I'd be so salty about the whole situation.
salty한 씁쓸한 느낌이 되게 강할 수도 있잖아요. 그래서 그럴
그러면은
때는
뭐
Yeah, everyone is different. Some people just cry in their hotel rooms and some try to make the most out of it. Since they came all the way overseas, they tend to just enjoy the vibe of the event. I like to stay active because although I feel sad about the loss, dwelling in sadness won't make the situation any better.
풀주가 있어도 괜히 더 이제 기분이 안 좋아지니까 떨어지고 나서 기분이 많이 안 좋긴 한데 그때
Yeah, I try to be productive with my time. On request, I might autograph some things for my fans.
할수 있는 시간을
Some fans come up to me to take some pictures.
기분은 안 좋지만
If you think about it, time is very precious.
와.
Yeah, for example, if I went all the way to Chicago,
시카고를 갔으면은
I'll try to enjoy what Chicago would offer me.
그때도 보면서 이제
Then later on, I would cheer for my friends who are still in the tournament
그다음에 뭐 트위터 같은
and
거
try to be active on my social media in the meantime.
네. 만약에 빨리 지면은
예. 그게 아
Some players, when they end up getting eliminated,
연습으로 가는 걸로
they'll just go to casual setup straight away and try to get as many games in.
매치 엄청 많이 하려고.
근데 저는 지고 나면은 한
Yeah, but when I lose, I really don't feel like playing that game for any longer, for at least more than 2 days. I want to rest and take a break, so I'll probably end up doing other things until I return back home to Korea or Japan. So if I feel sad and don't even do the stuff I mentioned, I feel regretful later back at home. I'd perhaps be better off getting much out of my travels than just feeling sad the entire
Yeah.
time.
So I guess there are ways to water down the salt. 철권은, do you remember when you first played Tekken?
아시나요?
정확히는 이제
To be precise, when I was 6 years old,
아버지가 플레이스테이션
my father bought me the first
사온
PlayStation.
게임이 이제 뭐 파이널 판타지 8
He bought a bundle with games like Final Fantasy VIII and Tekken 3.
이런 거 사오셨는데 그때
So that Tekken 3 was my first Tekken game.
철권 3였고 그때는
Soon after that, Korean arcades were really booming with Tekken 3 and the first Tekken Tag game.
네. 네.
Every arcade in Korea had Tekken Tag, and it was always full of people.
이제 오락실을 그때
Sadly, at the time, the arcades weren't the most safest places
네. 네.
for an elementary school students to go to.
근처에 이제 게임 샵에서 이제 체험
But at least I got some games in Tekken Tag with my friends
네.
at a local video game store,
초등학생들 친구들이랑
which had game demos on display.
철권 태그 1을 이제 조금씩 게임을 했었는데 근데 이제
We obviously had no technical knowledge of the game.
이해도 같은 거는 거의 없었고 이제
It was just mashing, doing 10 strings,
공중 콤보 이런 것만
and we made up our own simple juggle combos.
횡이동이라든지 이런 복잡한 시스템
But no way did we know about punishing or sidestepping.
그리고 나서 이제
Since then, for about 10 years, I had no real reason to play any fighting games.
고등학교 2학년 3학년 때쯤에
But when I was about 18 years old, there was an arcade nearby my high school.
공부를 굉장히 하기 싫어했었는데
And at the time, they had Tekken 6 cabinets.
네.
있었던 게임이
Also at the time, an esports series in Korea called the Tekken Crash was televised.
대회를 하고 있어가지고 그거를 보면서
So when I first saw those cabinets, I was like, hey, I saw this game on TV. I started playing a bit of Tekken after that. And because of it, I admit I didn't do too well with my grades.
언제
When did you realize that you were decent at the game?
철권 좀
Was there a time when you decided you should enter tournaments?
이제 이것은 좀 대회 좀 나갈 만하다. 내 기술을 갖고 언제부터 그런 생각이 들었어요.
근데 저는 좀
I had a bit more of a straightforward situation where I didn't really gradually progress in a way where someone would prepare to become a professional player.
기회가
I was more of a casual fan, but there was a team called Fursan back in 2018 who approached me to try playing the game on the international stage. At the time, I was a teammate of Lohai, and we started traveling to global Tekken events. We weren't the best players at the time, but we did consistently make top 8 spots, including EVO. Even at the time, I still wasn't convinced to continue playing Tekken for a longer period of time. But when I won the first TWT 2018 finals, that's when I realized I may be a decent player.
그렇게까지는 저는
TWT,
우승 말씀하시는 거.
yeah, that TWT finals was something. After your victory, we did a Korea gaming video at my place.
인터뷰하고
Yeah, even at that time when I was invited, I didn't feel like a pro gamer or anything.
예. 근데 이제 완전 캐릭터
Yeah, but your character was Panda, which
특별한
kind of made it a special moment and unforgettable.
선수
After my video and the video from the Score Esports, I remember you were looking for a sponsor. Were people contacting you at that time?
그러니까 이제 스폰서를 이제 찾고 있진 않았나요? 아니면은 스폰서가 들어오고 있었어요?
그때도 저도 이제
Well, I mean, I was still planning to continue play Tekken,
e스포츠 판에 대해서 잘 모르던 시기도 하고
but I was never familiar with this whole esports thing.
e스포츠 판이 좀
At the time, the esports scene of Tekken wasn't as big as it is now.
그때 우승했을 때는
네. 그러면 이제 커리어로 계속 근데 커리어는
You continued it as part of your career anyway.
계속 그래서 그때
Back then, we did discuss about you wanting to move to either Japan or the US.
저랑 얘기했을
Wasn't it something like Atlanta?
일본이나 미국으로 이사하고 싶다는 말씀이 있었는데 뭐 미국은 아마 뭐 아틀란타 쪽에서
No,
그게 아니라
I said
캐나다,
Canada.
밴쿠버.
캐나다였었는데
Oh, Canada.
캐나다도 이제 뭐 이사
So you had some options, but what made you decide on Japan?
일본으로 가게 돼가지고 그것은 이제 어떻게 결정하게 된 거였어요?
아무래도 그냥
To be honest, Japan was really well known for its fighting games culture, and it's closer to Korea.
캐나다 같은 경우
Canada or anywhere in North America is kind of too far away.
머니까
Right.
그렇죠.
영어를 배우고 싶
I really wanted to learn English, but the long distance was definitely the hurdle.
평소에
Meanwhile, Japan is closer, and I've been frequently traveling back and forth.
할줄 알았어.
I knew a bit of Japanese already, so I had no issues with communication.
Oh, so you already knew Japanese back then?
지금이랑 거의 똑같았어요.
Yes, it's the same as now.
그래요?
Oh, so you were already fluent.
Yeah, I was.
How did you get to learn Japanese?
I visited Japan for work holiday reasons for a year, and I also went to a Japanese school for about half a year.
So you go way back.
Yeah, it was back in 2016 to around 2017.
Well, I guess you made the right choice. So when did you initiate the actual move?
일본 가게 된 건 언제?
끝나고 나서 2000
Soon after the TWT finals, so it was around fall of 2019.
Fall, like autumn.
Yeah, at that time, the year 2019.
So after your TWT victory, were you going to study or look for work in Japan? Maybe continue your career as a pro gamer?
게이머를 하면서
When I was there, I was active as a pro gamer already while studying at a school.
게임을 하고 그다음에 전문학교도 나왔는데
After I graduated college, I wanted to look for a job,
그때 딱 코로나였으니까
but at the time, COVID had struck.
2021년이었으니까 그때가
예.
And it was around 2020, 2021.
그러니까 어려울 것 같으니까
So I thought it would be difficult to continue being a pro gamer.
그냥
So I was looking for work,
관련
maybe in the video games industry.
취직을 하자라고 생각을 했었는데 그때 또 마침
But thankfully, I received a decent offer from my esports team.
그때
Which team was that?
Oh, it's the same team that I'm currently with.
그러면 그런 생활을 보니까
So life as a pro gamer is still a new concept,
사실은 새로운 개념이잖아요.
even though fighting games out of all the esports is a very kind of an old person's kind of gaming that started from the arcade days. Does it put you in an awkward spot when you have to explain what you do as a living to family or friends?
보통 생활이 아니라서 좀 가족이나 친척이나 친구들한테 설명할 때 좀 어려운 점이 있나요? 아니면 뭐 방법이 있나요? 이렇게 무슨 생활을 하고 있는지.
저는 가족
I don't really go into full details of the pro gamer life with my family.
그렇게 많지는 않기 때문에
And I don't really have too much friends, but all my friends are mostly well informed.
알고 있고
어차피
Well, I guess thankfully, the idea of living an esports life is still, somewhat accepted in Japan at the moment. I mean, if you look at Street Fighter 6, it's become so popular there, and a lot of influencers are interested in Street Fighter, and those who weren't into fighting games are playing them now too. Do you think stuff like that has affected you as well?
음
Well, nowadays you don't have to be embarrassed about saying that you're an esports pro gamer compared to like say 10 years ago. It was very different back then. If I have to explain this lifestyle to those who might not get it, I still struggle a little explaining. Maybe I just tell them that I work at a gaming industry
Like as a consultant for a video game company?
or like at a video game event.
행사 관련해서 일을 하고 있다 이런 식으로 둘러 말하는 경우가 있는데
But if they do seem to know the current era better, I directly say that I'm a pro gamer.
예, 예, 그 프로게이머
Yeah, so the pro gamer demographic is still, not so prominent.
되게 스페셜한 역할이잖아요. 솔직히 말하면은
And it kind of seems like a unique job description, right?
하시고 있는 게
To be honest, your position is actually a fighting game player's dream because,
고수랑 결혼
you've married with another strong fighting game player, you have a child together, and you've shaped your life involving fighting games in a big way.
그래서 이게 사실은
So even those people that are outside of fighting games, I imagine they would respect you a lot for that.
그냥 시간 낭비
The older people used to say that playing games was a waste of time, so it seems like it'd be a great achievement.
인생을 하나 만들 수 있다는
다들 하는 걱정이 이제
Yeah, the concerns that most people have towards me is it's pretty respectful that I live a life doing what I love, but it's about how stable it can be as a career choice. So even to this day, a lot of people hesitate to jump straight into becoming a pro gamer.
그런 생각은 없어요. 이제
So do you ever think about how much support there is for this ecosystem?
이제 계속
You have to get good at the game and hone your skills while the team supports your playing. Nowadays, there are huge events in the Middle East. Korea has its own Tekken League, and Japan is starting to be more consistent with their esports stuff. Do you think all this is temporary, or do you think it has a pretty bright future?
나중에 좀 많이 힘들 수도 있다 아니면은 이거는 좀 더 계속 커지고 계속 더 좋아질 거라고 생각해요.
그거는 저도 진짜
Yeah, even for me, it's really hard to predict the future because
철권이라는 게임 자체가
focusing on Tekken itself is not as big, even within Korea and Japan combined.
세계적인 뭐 사우디라든지 뭐
It has to continue getting interest from places like the Middle East and North America and be influenced from it. If the more populated areas continue on their scene, I think we'll also be in a good spot for the future.
태국에서
Going off topic, when we met in Bangkok,
때
Thailand, you told me
님이 저한테 와서
that you played some Street Fighter, or you were starting to, and I asked what character you used,
네네네.
어떤 캐릭터 쓰냐고 했는데
and you said Blanca.
블랑크는 확실히
Blanca is also a beast-like character.
격투 게임할 때
Do you always have a preference for selecting beast-like characters in fighting games?
특별한 캐릭터 그런
근데 이제
스타일인 것 같아요.
Street Fighter wasn't really a game that I was going to be serious at,
하려고 하는 게임이
and I just wanted to see how far I can go in the ranks. The reason for Blanca is that for most fighting games,
만족하려고
you can see yourself rising higher in the ranks faster when you select a not as popular character. Because naturally, the players usually don't have any matchup experiences.
이제는 블랑크 되게
Yeah, he's
세잖아요.
pretty strong in 6.
대회 때도 많이 보이고 하더라고요.
Yeah, I see him often in tournaments.
거의 이제 철권
I couldn't play Street Fighter 6 as much due to Tekken 8 being released. But I had some free time back in the COVID days, and I played a fair bit of Street Fighter 5. It was so fun to play, but I still had to practice Tekken at the same time,
재미는 엄청 있었는데
so I didn't really get to enjoy a much higher level of play.
예, 그게 문제죠.
So, as a pro gamer, you have a lot of obligations, right?
집중을 해야 되는데 이제 딴 게임도 하고 싶은 마음이 있을 거 아니에요.
We're all human, so we do want to
마이클 조던도
find a way to have some fun here and there.
어떤 순간에 그냥
Even Michael Jordan said that
별거
he wanted to play baseball and actually did.
해서 딴 게임도 하고
He didn't do well, but at least he had fun doing it.
싶은 거
Are there any favorite games or games that you want to play during your free time?
저도 평소에는 이제
I usually play League of Legends and StarCraft to cool off during my Tekken training.
조금씩 하고 있는데
League and StarCraft, Brood War, or StarCraft 2?
Brood War, because, of course, I'm Korean.
Yeah, I know Junting is pretty good at Brood War among the Tekken players.
Yeah, but compared to him, I'm not that good in skill. I watch some StarCraft YouTubers during breaks, and there are still a handful of people who are playing the game at a very high level. So I sometimes get nostalgic and play StarCraft myself sometimes.
Yeah, only the best players remain now. Everyone is too good.
Yeah, it's a very hard game to master. I play for about an hour before going to bed after my daily Tekken training.
Ah.
근데 이제
During the Tekken 7 era, before my child was born, I had more time to play other games during breaks. Nowadays, since I've become a family man, after my Tekken training, I have to focus on caring for the baby. So the hours of playing the games is down to like an hour a day for me nowadays.
What about single player games? You ever play any of those?
Oh, I hardly ever played any single player games. Games like Dark Souls, Elden Ring, Monster Hunter, and the Persona series. I preferred the games where you can play with other people. So even if it's an RPG game, it's usually the MMORPGs where I can enjoy with other players. I only see enjoyment in video games if there are other people involved. But I did play the Pokemon games when I was younger.
That might be why you're into fighting games.
Yeah, it just doesn't seem fun playing games by yourself.
Yeah, I do think that's important, the social aspect in games. Nowadays, everyone's on their smartphones and looking at screens all day, and I still feel fighting games allow you to meet people in offline events. You can watch streams at home, but when you get to meet real people, I think it's really shows the positive aspects of the FGC.
격투 게임의 좋은 장점이지 않을까 그런 생각이 있죠.
이제
예.
뭐 안 좋은 사람들도 있는데 좋은 사람들도 많이 있으니까.
Yeah, sometimes you meet some weird people out there, but even that is all part of the socializing process.
다 되는 것 같아요. 네.
Yeah, it's not common for other esports genres to meet in person on that scale so much.
I've heard of meetups and gatherings for certain RPG players, but it's not as frequent compared to the fighting game players. Team-based FPS gamers are usually always conversing over voice chat, so meeting in person is not that special for them.
예.
격투 게임은 어느 정도 있으니까.
Yeah, well, I guess in your case, you got to meet your wife Mimi because of the FGC social aspect, right?
Well, I guess so, yeah.
Yeah, I imagine it's because of the community.
큰 장점. 그런 게임에 대한 질문 다 끝났고 그냥 마지막으로
But the last question is about 설렁탕. So we're going to get 설렁탕 later for lunch.
설렁탕 먹으러 갈 건데
네.
이제 자주
And
옥이라는 집이
and whenever we meet, we always go to this place called 마포옥,
거기 갔었는데 이제 다시 이번에 가려고 하는데
right?
그 사이에
You're not going there frequently?
많이 다녀봤다고.
Yeah, I've been there 10 times already.
갔어요. 아 진짜
10 times.
Yeah, well, it's 10 times in the past 6 years, so it doesn't sound like it's much. But whenever the Japanese players visit Korea, they always want to get some good Korean food. They're always around the Hongdae area because the practice venue is nearby there. But thankfully, their hotels aren't that far from the Mapo area, and I have a car, so we all go together to get 설렁탕 from Mapook. The Japanese players love that food.
Yeah, 설렁탕's not as popular and common compared to other well-known Korean foods.
그렇죠. 모르는 사람들도 많고 이제 만약 있더라도 맛이 없는.
Yeah, sadly, it's not as well known. Some places use cheap ingredients as well, and
딴 데는 별로 맛이 없거든요.
you can tell by the flavor whether it's cheap or using premium ingredients.
엄청나게 맛있는 음식이 되는데.
So it's hard to find the really good ones.
Yeah, whenever I explain my friends outside of Korea the concept of 설렁탕, it's not that appealing because it seems like a really simple dish. It has a small but dedicated fan base, it seems. How do the Japanese Tekken players rate 설렁탕?
어떻게 반응이 어때요? 원래는
처음에는 그냥 그런데 이제
Yeah, they're about the same. At first, they don't think it's that special, but once they try it, they say it's easily the top 3 of their favorite Korean foods.
Yeah, I remember we went with Chikrin that one time. He liked it too, right?
Oh, especially Chikrin was kind of split on the fence about it. But Nobi and Pinya loved it so much, and I can proudly say that most players who visited liked it very much.
Nice. Okay, we're all on the same page then.
Yeah, I'm sure they're also thinking about 설렁탕 right now.
Okay, well, it's our turn to eat, so let's go.